Hello and welcome to the Ultimate Bull Run, where we bring 100 bulls, 100 stories in this one legendary run. Today, we're in for an absolute treat with a guest who is a true boss in the Bitcoin world. She is the incredible host of the top rated podcast, Coin Stories, where she takes us on a fascinating journey through Bitcoin and its impact on global economics and the technology. But that's not all. She's also an award winning journalist, a fantastic educator who knows how to break down concept like no other. Her journey from TV journalism to becoming the leading Bitcoin advocate is inspiring and filled with passion. So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and join us as we dive into the world of Bitcoin with one and only Natalie Brunell. Welcome to the show, Natalie. Welcome to the Ultimate Bull Run.
Well, thank you so much. You're so kind. I really appreciate that introduction. It was really sweet.
That's what you are, right? You have accomplished a lot of things already, and so much more to do. Definitely, right? Um,
Thank you.
so, Natalie, your journey from award-winning, TV journalist to leading voice in the Bitcoin space is truly fascinating. It is. What inspired you this transition, and how was your background in journalism influenced your perspective on Bitcoin?
Sure, gosh. I mean, I really feel like my journalism career prepared me in ways that I never expected. I did not intend to work in the Bitcoin space. I started my podcast just as a hobby and as a passion project, but I was just so fascinated by Bitcoin and I was really learning about it a lot on my free time. And I tried to report on it. I tried to do a lot of stories about Bitcoin, but my networks just weren't into it, unfortunately. So I had to go sort of on my own time and do it. What's crazy is when I look back at my journalism career, I was interviewing so many people who were dealing with the problems that Bitcoin addresses, the problem of broken money, the fact that the cost of living is soaring, the cost of healthcare, education. People graduate just stacked with debt and they don't know how to pay it back, and they're not as hopeful about the future of being able to own a house and retire and have a family. And I didn't understand why all of this was happening. I sort of am guilty of thinking the way that a lot of people do right now still, that it's all political, that people are really greedy at the top and they're not willing to share. And I was so wrong. I had to be humbled by my Bitcoin journey. And when I started to learn about Bitcoin, I realized that I really did not have a fundamental understanding of how money worked, where money came from, and how banking worked. So Bitcoin helped me really go down the rabbit hole of understanding that, which is critical. Like, I think financial literacy is so important. And then when I connected the dots, I just realized that Bitcoin is our best hope for fixing a lot of these problems and for giving hope to people and allowing them to save for the future and getting us out of some of these disastrous consequences of our current monetary system. And I decided to share it, and my podcast turned into my full-time job, which I'm so grateful for. But we have so many people to reach, so we got to keep trying because there are so many people who still need the message of Bitcoin.
That is true. May I know when did all that started? What year?
Yeah, so I was in news from 2009 until about 2021, and I learned about Bitcoin for the first time in 2017. But I totally dismissed it. I was very skeptical. I assumed that because it's digital, it can be hacked. I could lose all my money. I didn't appreciate what the problem really was because I didn't understand money. So it took me a couple of years. I had a mentor give me the book, The Bitcoin Standard. And that really sent me on my journey and made me realize, oh my gosh, Bitcoin is transformative and revolutionary, and I need to learn everything about it.
It is indeed. So adding onto what you said, we have come very far in terms of technological advancement, from holding onto the gold to turning that gold into a paper money to giving all of the money to the bank and getting a debit or credit card. And to you now we're not using anything but just a smartphone to make everyday transactions, right? So as an educator, you have mastered the art of explaining concept, the concept that Bitcoin is in terms of the decentralization and the blockchain technology and why it is even needed. um, what do you say, how do you explain those terms, to ranging audience from Gen Zs to boomers like Peter Schiff, right, and many more? What do you say to them?
Well, I think it's always just really good to meet people where they are. I like to ask questions and better understand if people actually recognize what the problem is and the fact that we live in a system that is extremely unfair and it benefits the people at the top and the people who have influence and access at the expense of everyone else. And so I ask them questions about why is it that homes are so much more expensive today than they were in the 1970s and wages have not kept up with it? Why is it that the people who sort of are close to the people in politics, why is it that they tend to get more of the money? Why is it that politicians are wealthier than ever? And I sort of start to peel back the layers because I think you have to really understand that our system at the base layer is built on inflation. And that doesn't just mean that they're issuing more money and that money is like the physical cash that we used to transact with. It's literally in the form of debt. We are issuing more and more credit and IOUs, and we're using our American Express to pay our Visa and our Visa to pay our MasterCard. And America's lucky in the sense that it prints the global reserve currency. So we can just keep issuing. And there are consequences to that, right? It's an unsustainable system at the base layer. And it's a system that over time impoverishes the majority of people, does not allow them to save, and it benefits the people at the very top. And now we're coming to a place where those consequences are becoming a reality. People are feeling really frustrated. They're not able to keep up with the cost of living. Their children are disenfranchised. They're not able to afford the things that previous generations could. And so, of course, understandably, they're sort of acting out politically and on social media, and they're venting their frustrations. And we see more instances of populism because people are fed up and they don't think it's fair. And they're right. It's not fair. At the base layer, we have a system of incentives that is completely corrupted. It's not something that I think was intentionally designed to do this, to wreak such havoc, but it did because unfortunately, the way that technology has evolved, you pointed out, gold becomes centralized, it's papered over, then we have to trust the banks not to issue too many paper notes, and we have to trust the government to do the same. And then on top of that, it becomes electronic. And now you're just issuing all these electronic debts, and no one really knows, I mean, how much money there actually is in the system, how many dollars are out there. So much of it is just a house of cards. And banks, if we were all to go try to withdraw our money from our retail banks, they wouldn't have even like a tiny fraction of it. So it's really a house of cards. And I think when you explain to people how fragile that underlying system and how much it really hurts the average person, then they're better equipped to really hear the message of Bitcoin and how it addresses that and how it creates this system of rules instead of rulers so that we can all trust a network that doesn't rely on trust. And the current system relies on us trusting all these intermediaries who all take a cut and monitor and surveil everything you're doing, and they just expand credit infinitely. And we need a system that is based on rules and math and physics, and one that no one can manipulate and just have a special advantage in.
That is interesting way to see those things. And I did start it in 2017 as well. And when I started out, so far I've onboarded like 27 people to the Bitcoin and the blockchain itself. And most of them were, I mean, when I tried to explain all these things, right? Um, the only kind of thing they were leaning towards is, will the government support it? It is something that is kind of opposing the current system. Will the government allow it? And now we are seeing it. In 2017 it wasn't. It was more of a, the black market stuff. That's where it was, most frequently using it. But on this topic, right, you've been passionate about advocating the Bitcoin as an alternative traditional financial system, right? Can you share some specific advantage that you believe Bitcoin has over fiat currencies or even gold that is superior choice?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think we're long past the stage of our government, the United States government, banning Bitcoin. In fact, right now, I think it's going to be a battle between the different candidates of who loves Bitcoin more and who's going to be better for Bitcoin. And we're really seeing the political pressure emerge because this is a very important voting block. I recently learned that Coinbase has like 98 million registered users. That's a huge chunk of votes potentially, right? So
Yeah.
so I think in the future, the government is going to do what it can to be very pro crypto and Bitcoin and place place the regulatory framework into this industry that it really needs in order to operate in the best way, in the most ethical way as well. Really, I think that Bitcoin is the best way to save for the future. So when you think about fiat currencies, all of them are sort of designed at their core to lose value over time, because when you can just print something and there's no cost to producing more, then obviously you're going to devalue and debase every individual unit. And that's the current system that we live in. I think down the road, governments will always want to be able to print their own money. I think there's going to be, advantages that they see to people transacting maybe in different currencies and paying their taxes in their individual currencies. But I think more and more people are going to use Bitcoin as a store of value. It's something that cannot be manipulated, cannot be debased, will never be inflated, will never be changed or influenced. And it's something that you can transact globally permissionlessly, which I think is just an incredible technology. I mean, all of this is based on open source, transparent freedom technology, which all of us are entitled to. We're all entitled to freedom and property rights. As far as gold, gold I think would have been the money that we should maybe return to if Bitcoin hadn't been invented. Gold has wonderful properties as a sound money, and it has obviously a longer track record. But gold does have some defects in the sense that it is physical. It is difficult to verify and transport over long distances, which is why we came to a system where we papered over it and turned it all into fiat, where it's just essentially IOUs and electronic credit. So we need to improve upon it, and Bitcoin does. Bitcoin was created over, it took 40 years of research and development in the computer programming and computer science world to actually be able to come to Bitcoin. There were so many failed experiments and attempts that just did not work and ultimately were centralized and, didn't account for the ability to maintain a fixed supply. And so Bitcoin was a breakthrough. It's a revolutionary technological and computer science breakthrough that is the hardest money that has ever been engineered, and that will allow us to save for our futures, which is so critical, I think, for human advancement and prosperity.
It is indeed. It is tough to see a country or the evolution from gold as a reserve currency, and we got rid of the gold, and we used the country's economy to build up and print more money, right? It's really sad. At the same time, there is opportunity, like the Bitcoin, whatever it provides. Do you envision a future where we shift towards a global currency that is backed by people's trust, which is what Bitcoin and blockchain is, right? Rather than country's economy, which we currently have with the US, right? How realistic do you think this scenario plays out, and what would it take to get there, or maybe even a digital currency that is backed by a precious metal like gold or silver, right?
I think it would be very wise for the world to turn to a global Bitcoin standard, because it would unify everything and bring us all together under one thing that is the same for everyone, that everyone can verify and has access to. I think it would be the best thing we could possibly do, because although governments obviously like to issue their own currencies and they're able to conduct more of the projects and endeavors that they want to when they can just print money instead of having to tax people or earn it or work for it. We have so many unproductive actions and businesses that emerge when you have all of these different floating currencies that really aren't backed by anything of substance anymore. I think in the book, The Bitcoin Standard, Saifedean pointed out how many trillions of dollars every single year are spent solely on transacting and exchanging different currencies. There was nothing productive that happened. There was no building that was built, no company that was created. It's just literally exchanging one fiat currency for a different one, and someone takes a cut in the middle. I mean, what could we do if all of that energy and all of that action was actually dedicated to something productive in society if we were all under the same monetary standard. And there's a lot of evidence to show that the last time that the globe was on one monetary standard, which was gold, that ushered in some of the greatest innovations and companies and human ingenuity that we've ever seen. I mean, some of the biggest things that impact our lives, from petrochemicals and telegraphs and telecommunications and airplane technology and refrigeration and all these things, were actually created under a gold standard, a hard money standard. So I envision a world where we do eventually turn to Bitcoin because it just makes the most sense. But I think we're just a long way from it. I think, again, currencies are preferred by governments. I think they're going to want to continue to issue them. Most debt around the world is denominated in the US dollar. And I think it will take a long time to dethrone its status, even though a lot of people, including on my show, talk about de-dollarization. But I think it's a very slow, long drawn out process. What I think we're seeing is the shift away from US treasuries and the dollar as a global reserve asset in treasuries. But I think the dollar, as far as a medium of exchange, a lot of people will still continue to transact in it. There are a lot of weaker currencies. I mean, there are 160 currencies around the world. A lot of them will maybe collapse into the dollar. So we have a ways to go. But I do believe that in the future, we can and should eventually, come to a Bitcoin standard. It would make so much more sense and make everything so much easier.
It does, and like you pointed out earlier, there's a lot of intermediaries fees in between.
Yeah.
Just sending or converting US dollar to euros and euros to some other currency. It
Yeah.
In every step you have to pay a certain amount, and that
Yeah.
is absurd. Yeah, it is. While we are on this topic, right? How do you think this is a little bigger topic in a sense? Assume that whatever you said in coming future, we are heading towards a reserve currency, which is Bitcoin. Let's assume that we get there, right? 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the road. What happens and all of a sudden, right? Something happens and all of the internet goes away in one specific country. How do we handle those kind of things in terms of, yes, it is stored in a software, definitely, but the internet, I mean, the backbone of the blockchain and internet, the Bitcoin is internet, right? And electricity.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to focus on some of these doomsday scenarios because they are so. I think that the possibility is so small and so rare of a black swan like that. But if you think about the current system, most of us don't transact in cash anymore. We certainly don't go to stores and pay in gold coins or bars. That's really not the way that we interact economically. Everything really relies on connectivity that is telegraphic, electronic. And so I think that if that were to happen, it would create tremendous problems and tremors, even if we were still on a fiat standard. The great thing about Bitcoin is there have been a lot of advancements in the last few years to ensure that communication lines remain intact, even if things like the grid were to fail or the internet were to go down in significant locations. So things like radio waves, satellites, different ways of communicating via Bitcoin that will still allow you to remain connected to the network. And so I just don't see a scenario where people will all sort of lose the ability to transact all at once. I mean, that literally to me is like a doomsday. The world is coming to a very bad place, if not the end. So I think that Bitcoin, again, is really our best chance for creating a more fair system that provides more opportunity and hope to the most amount of people. Really, just a more fair system at its base layer. And I think that we do have challenges when it comes to technologies in general and maintaining, stabilizing the grid, ensuring that we have the ability to provide people with what they need when they need it. But I actually think Bitcoin will help with that because miners are location agnostic and they are going to places where energy is very cheap and it's stranded or wasted, and it's able to create opportunities there for people to come and create productive activities and to flourish. So I actually think that Bitcoin will help connect communities in different places of the world to energy that previously have not been. So I actually think that Bitcoin will help get everyone onto the internet actually faster. And I try not to focus on the potential negative outcomes that I think would be bad for any type of money.
That is a great answer. Yes, the question is very hypothetical, but that was a really great answer. Yeah. Talking about the investment side of the crypto, right? Investment in crypto, the entire market is always a roller coaster. It has been so far. Can you share some of your kind of most memorable investment stories? What were your highs and lows, and what have you experienced like that shaped your current investment strategy?
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I wasn't a very sophisticated investor because I just didn't understand money and I was really fearful of risking it and losing it. So I wasn't someone who grew up with parents who invested in the stock market. So I did not, I saw it as being extraordinarily risky. And I always saved in cash, which I did not know was such a mistake because as they create more units of dollars, each one of mine buys me less and less every single year, right? That's the pernicious tax of inflation. Until I learned about Bitcoin, I was someone who, again, kind of tried to save, but in cash. So I lost a lot of money along the way. I thought stock market was far too risky. I would buy lotto tickets like so many people. You can probably understand, it's probably intuitive that the majority of people who buy lottery tickets they're very poor and they spend all this money and they never win anything, right? But it's sort of that like gamble. You're like, oh well, what if I hit the jackpot and make so much money and I don't have to worry so much? And so there's really been a disservice in our education system to not teach people properly how to invest, how to really save in a way that's meaningful for their future. And we've turned to a lot of this passive investing as we've financialized our economy. So, you put it in your 401k account or someone does it for you, or it's like a traditional 60/40 portfolio. And it's really just basically tracked the inflation rate of the monetary base. As they expand the money supply, your stocks go up around the same amount or your house gets more valuable, but your wages are not keeping up. And so that's what's really hurt younger generations who come out and they're indebted and they can't keep up and they can't catch up to where the system has gone. So I think for me, the biggest lesson about Bitcoin was the importance of actually being able to save. Bitcoin is not, to me, an investment. It is a savings technology. I see it as the most conservative thing I could really do with my money. I understand it enough that I allocate a significant portion of my portfolio or net worth to Bitcoin. And I think it's the best chance for us to be able to turn to a system of actually savings and productivity and capitalism as opposed to being consumers and just going further and further into debt as both individuals and governments as well. So Bitcoin for me is the simplest way to invest because it's like a set it and forget it policy to save for your future.
That is amazing. Yeah, story. So it is just a buy and hold
Yeah.
strategy. That has worked out really well compared to people who just do a trading stuff. When we see yes, it is wild. The volatility is wild, right? But when we see, even if you bought at what 20, the all time high, you're still in profit.
Yeah.
And if you had put that in your bank account just with the cash, your money would actually be less worth than putting in a Bitcoin. That is
Yeah.
absolutely true. Indeed. Um, and talking about the technology behind the blockchain, right? The consensus mechanism. You have got a clear preference for the proof of work over the proof of stake. Can you dive into your reasoning behind this preference? What is your view on Energy West? Because every node that is running the Bitcoin and every node that is working on it, only one wins, and the rest is just the wastage, right? But it is necessary to build the network that we have currently have. What's your like reason behind preferring the proof of work over the proof of stake?
Well, proof of work creates a system that no one has to trust and that everyone can verify and everyone has fair and equal access to. And it's based on actually putting in the work and get extracting value because you're putting in value. Our system, one of the biggest failures of it is that as you go through time, the people who are closest to the money printer benefit the most. They are disproportionately at an advantage, and they don't have to put in any work to create more monetary units. They don't have to defer any consumption. They don't have to save anything in order to spend it later. They literally can just click the stroke of a key and create, trillions more if they want to, in terms of actual dollars in the system. There is no work that was done. There is kind of a detachment from economic reality, and it's an IOU and a burden that's placed on the future to pay it back. And in a system of Bitcoin, it's this proof of work mechanism that, again, everyone has the ability to access and be a part of, and you have to expend energy for the chance to try to earn Bitcoin and try to validate these transactions, and no one has a special advantage. And whether you have 1,000,000 Bitcoin or just one, you can participate, and you equally have the potential chance of mining a Bitcoin block. I like that system because at the base layer, it's a system of rules that everyone has to follow, and no one can manipulate it, and no one has a special advantage. A system like proof of stake, I think, especially over time, mirrors our current system and the problems within it, where the more that you have, the more power you have, the more you get to do, the more you get to validate, the more you get to earn, and the vicious cycle continues. That's a system that over the long run becomes extraordinarily unequal when it comes to wealth. It becomes very concentrated in power and wealth. And where there's economic power concentrated, I think that comes with also political power, and that's very bad. I think we need a system where more people actually have to compete on a level playing field. That's where I think the most value actually emerges. Otherwise, you have a system like in ours where the more you have, you're able to sort of it's not, the system is sort of rigged in the sense that you will benefit from it. Let's say you have a massive monopoly. You have a massive corporation that has access to money at a lower rate than a small business that's just emerged. Well, you're going to be able to outcompete that small business. It doesn't have that fair chance that you do as you've ballooned into this massive entity. That's how fiat essentially works and robs us of quality over time. So Bitcoin at the base layer through the blockchain and through proof of work sets up a system that, again, no one has a special advantage. Everyone has access to this ledger, and everyone can participate in it. They have to expend energy. They have to actually find the resources. And in many cases, the energy component is a fascinating one to explore, because so many people think that it uses too much energy, but actually it uses less energy than many of the industries that we view as critical, like tourism or transportation, for example. Bitcoin uses far, far less, and it goes after these wasted and stranded energy sources. If I were to say, Bitcoin over the long run could literally capture all of these stranded sources of energy and still not equal some of these massive industries that we rely on, I think people wouldn't be as upset about it. But yet there's so much misunderstanding and FUD and, fake headlines out there that are meant to wrangle people. And so I think people need to just take a deeper dive into it. Bitcoin actually uses energy for a very specific purpose. It creates a cost to creating money. And I think that's really critical. We shouldn't have a system where there are a few people who get to just press a button and create a bunch of monetary units. It should come from a very fair system with a absolute finite supply like Bitcoin.
True, that is very true. And I hope a lot of people will realize after watching this video, it is, we all are working to earn the money,
Yeah.
but there is someone out there who just, creates a policy and prints out $1 trillion.
Yes,
And that's not
exactly.
fair. That is not fair. That is true. So that is very true. So given your deep involvement with Bitcoin community, where do you see Bitcoin and the broader crypto market heading in next 5 to 10 years? Are there
Yeah.
any trends and the development that excites you the most?
Yeah, I think short term it's going to continue to be volatile because all of us were, you can't predict day-to-day behavior and the psychology of people when you have all these different market factors in a complex system at work. But when you zoom out, it will be the best performing asset, I think, of it was the last decade and it will be the next decade. So I think there are a lot of exciting things to come because we're so early. A lot of people think they're late. They see Bitcoin as, there's a certain price tag. Oh, I'm behind. Well, this is why I think we should get on the SAT standard and start talking about, units of Satoshi, which are still very accessible, and you could get a lot of Satoshi for a couple dollars. I think we should move to that because there's sort of a unit of account bias. And I think more and more people will just start to add Bitcoin to their portfolios, both individuals as well as companies and institutions and pension funds, and everyone is going to have at least a little bit of Bitcoin. That means, there are billions of people out there. That means that the number with its finite supply, the price per Bitcoin is going to continue to go up, and it's going to help a lot of people accumulate wealth, preserve their wealth, preserve the money that they worked so hard to earn in all different types of industries. I think it's going to be a huge equalizer for young people, millennials and Gen Z, who have been so left behind by the current system and really at a disadvantage. They're going to be able to catch up finally, and they should be able to. They should be able to earn for themselves and buy a house and have the family that they want without stressing out as much as I know a lot of them do. So I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of Bitcoin adoption. And again, short term, in the short run, it's going to be very choppy at times, and sometimes it's going to go down. But over the long run, when you zoom out, it's, I think, up only.
It has been so far, definitely. Talking about this, um, getting people on board with the Bitcoin and all this stuff. One of the things that I was having trouble was getting the people know more about the wallet, and you have to now. You are in a decentralized world, right? Whatever you make, it's yours, and there is no one who's controlling it, and that's a lot of responsibility as well. It is a freedom, but it has a lot of responsibility. With the Bitcoin ETF, we saw a lot of the boomers and someone who don't want to keep track of all those things. They have now access to Bitcoin without worrying about the private key, without worrying about how to secure those things. Now they have those access, right? With with this introduction of the Bitcoin ETF and the increasing regulation, do you think this bull run is different from the previous ones that we had? If so, how?
Yeah, I do. I think it's much different because now we have Wall Street that has come in and legitimized this asset class, and they are offering more options for people to invest in it. There's these new vehicles that are very familiar to traditional investors, the ETF products that's really easy. With one click, you can add it to your retirement portfolio. It's a great way for RIAs to start to allocate to this space, pension funds. There are a lot of organizations and firms that are not able to invest in spot Bitcoin, and these vehicles make it possible for them to invest in the asset. But overall, I think that the big takeaway is I really am excited about a future of optionality. Today, we all have bank accounts, and we have to trust these retail banks that many of us are very familiar with, and they do monitor everything, they surveil it, they potentially sell your data, or there are massive hacks. And so in the future, I think you're going to have an option. You can put your trust into an institution if you don't want to manage your key. And I think people should take that decision very seriously, because you are introducing counterparty risk, and you are introducing a third party that is going to know more information about you and your finances and your financial transactions. Or you can become your own bank and take self-custody and transact and run a node. And I really think it's important to protect that freedom on the other side of self-sovereignty, because this system empowers that. If you want to be self-sovereign and not have a bank account, then today you're going to have to stash a bunch of cash around your house, right? Or gold bars, and that's not very easy. And in a lot of places, no longer even taking cash. So Bitcoin allows you to store all of your wealth in a place that is electronic. And I think more and more businesses will accept Bitcoin. They will want for you to pay in Bitcoin because they're going to want to accumulate it. So I think people will have the option. They'll be able to invest in ETFs for their retirement planning, in their traditional accounts, retirement accounts. They will be able to purchase Bitcoin on an exchange and trust different exchanges with their keys if that's what makes them comfortable, or they can learn how to become their own bank and get a cold storage wallet, which I definitely advocate for, and do multi-sig custody. But I think in the future, people will have many more options than they do today with
That
their
is
money.
that is true. We have seen Wisconsin Retirement Fund. They
Yeah.
recently added a lot of ETFs, right? Uh,
Yes, they did. I think that they allocated to the BlackRock, but it was to the tune of, I think, several tens of millions of dollars. So yeah, really
it
exciting.
was a lot. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, Talking about the someone who just started the journey, we call them aspiring pools. What advice would you give them to navigate this, the exciting but volatile space?
If someone's just new to the space and investing, I would just say learn as much as you can about it, because the more that you understand something, the more that you can defend it, the more that you know exactly how much you're comfortable allocating. I've never met someone who has done 1,000 hours of homework on Bitcoin and isn't just fascinated by it and totally has conviction that this is a meaningful solution to many of our problems. So I think that the position in someone's portfolio directly reflects how much education that they've done. So if you're at like 1%, I think you need to learn a little bit more about Bitcoin. You might feel a little bit more comfortable. So I think education is really the big thing. It's important to hear opposing views and really look into them, because you're never going to come from a position of strength and really understand something until you know the arguments against it. So I think that's important as well. And if you're just starting out with things like self custody, everything you can learn anything. Everything is approachable and can be simplified. Just, there are a lot of resources out there, so look for them and don't be intimidated by the technical aspects of Bitcoin. A lot of people who are not technical are able to do all of the things, run a node, take self custody. So I just encourage people to, take the time to actually learn and try to become their own bank.
That is true, and yes, a lot of people get scared about all these things. Like if you lose your private key, you're gonna lose all of the things that you had, and like that is a no to a lot of people who are not technical, but it is not difficult. No, you can remember 12 words. It's not a big deal. But
Yeah.
if you don't, you can save it somewhere. And if you are confused on any of the topics that we are discussing, just ask questions. The community is really strong. They can really help each other out, and that's what the decentralization is all about, right? So we are reaching to the final questions. On your Coin Stories podcast, right? You highlight personal journeys within the Bitcoin space. Can you share some impactful story from your interviews that really illustrates like how Bitcoin has transformed someone's life?
Yeah, I mean, I've really been inspired by so many different stories from around the world. I mean, everyone needs Bitcoin and everyone comes to it from such a different background and pain point. It's been really fascinating to hear stories of people who it's not that they came to Bitcoin because they were curious and they wanted it, they actually needed it. There are so many people, billions, who still live under very oppressive authoritarian regimes who are not able to freely transact. There are still women in countries who can't hold bank accounts without a man's permission. There are people whose savings get debased by 100% overnight when they wake up with their foreign currency because of the person that's in charge. And Bitcoin has been a lot less volatile for them than their own currencies. And so Bitcoin has provided an escape hatch for so many people. It's been a life raft and a source of hope and freedom. And I'm inspired by so many of the different stories I've heard. I have a segment on my YouTube channel, or a playlist that's called Bitcoiners Around the World, and you'll hear stories of people from South Africa and the Philippines, and an American who sold her house and put all the money in Bitcoin. I mean, you'll hear stories from all over the world. And as far as the bigger public figures, they've also been super inspiring to talk with, because one thing that I noticed very early in the space is there are a lot of very brilliant, very successful people who came to the conclusion that Bitcoin is the next best thing and the greatest opportunity. And I wanted to better understand why and how and where they came from and why they had such conviction in this technology. So my interviews with Saylor and Lynn Alden and all the folks that maybe people are more familiar with have been great too, because I got a lot of their human kind of origin stories, especially early on. And I love talking to people about where they come from and why they think the way that they do. So it's been a really rewarding journey getting to do the podcast for sure.
Awesome, awesome. It is more than, yes, Bitcoin is more than just an investment vehicle. For a lot of people outside of America, like you mentioned, Africa
Yeah.
and Middle East, it is the only thing that is holding a lot of people, and that's the only way they can transact between whatever they are right now. They can use it for, and it is really important to understand the outside view. I will definitely link the podcast, the series that you said, the
Thank
Bitcoiners
you.
around the world. Yeah. For the final questions, what do you think it takes to be the ultimate bull? Whatever your terms and definition of the ultimate bull is, what do you think it takes to be the ultimate bull?
Well, I think the ultimate bull, puts their money where their mouth is, and they have conviction because of the work that they've put in to educate themselves. And it's not just talk, and it's not for pumping something to only later dump it. It's really about something meaningful for the long run. And I feel very strongly that Bitcoin is going to be the most bullish community and asset class that you could invest in. And I'm really excited to see what companies and applications emerge over the next decade, because as people invest in Bitcoin, I think amazing entrepreneurs will create more use cases and applications and make it a lot easier so that you won't even know that you're really interacting with the Bitcoin network. And so I'm very bullish on Bitcoin for that reason too.
Awesome. No, we heard it. We heard what it takes to be the ultimate bull. Thank you so much, Natalie. At the end, we, as a show of appreciation for your time and effort, we hand this out to you.
Oh, thank
Um, I,
you.
I will reach out to you personally on the shipping address, and I'll send this.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Thank you very much.